6 signs you're not depressed. God is awakening a prophet inside you. There are moments in life when the weight inside you feels too heavy to name, and people around you rush to label it as depression because that's the closest word they have. But deep down you sense something different, something deeper, something sacred. It's not just sadness, it's not just exhaustion. It's not just that you feel too much or retreat too often. There is a spiritual depth to what you're experiencing, a holy intensity that refuses to fit neatly into human explanations, and you keep wondering why the heaviness does not break you, why the loneliness feels strangely purposeful, why your tears don't simply drown you but seem to water something inside you, something growing, something awakening. I want you to pause and breathe for a moment, because what you're facing is not a sign that you're weak. It's not a sign that God has left you. In fact, it may be the clearest sign that He is closer to you than anyone realizes. There is a kind of soul wrestling that happens only to people God has marked. There is a kind of inner trembling that belongs only to those who carry a message larger than themselves. You're not breaking down. You're being prepared. God often shapes His prophets in silence long before He ever speaks through them in public. This world does not understand people who feel deeply, who see differently, who carry burdens they cannot explain. So it gives your pain a worldly name, but heaven calls it something else. Heaven calls it sensitivity, calling, consecration. The very thing that makes you feel different is the same thing that makes you chosen. When others collapse under the weight you're carrying, you endure. When others run from the emotions you face, you sit with them and listen for God's voice. When others see chaos, you sense meaning. When others feel inconvenience, you feel spiritual urgency. Maybe that's why you often retreat from crowds, not because you hate people, but because your spirit needs clarity. Maybe that's why you sense battles even when nothing is happening on the surface. Not because you're imagining problems, but because your spirit is tuned into things others are blind to. Maybe that's why your sadness comes without reason. Not because you're broken, but because God often speaks first through burden before He releases revelation. You're here right now, listening to these words because something inside you is waking up. You're starting to see that what looked like emotional collapse might actually be spiritual elevation. And if your heart is trembling a bit while you hear this, it's because your spirit recognizes truth faster than your mind does. You are not sinking. You are being set apart. You are not fading. You are being refined. You are not depressed. You might just be a prophet God has been shaping in the shadows. Number 1. Your deep sadness is a spiritual sensitivity God placed in you. There is a kind of sadness that doesn't come from disappointment, heartbreak, or traumatic events. It rises from a place so deep that you can't trace its origin, and no matter how many times people tell you to cheer up, it lingers. This sadness isn't an emotional flaw. It isn't a sign that something is wrong with your mind. It is a spiritual indicator, a sensitivity placed inside you by God Himself. Prophets in Scripture carried this same weight. Jeremiah felt the sorrow of a nation long before judgment came. Ezekiel sat stunned for days because of what he saw in the Spirit. Even Jesus, the greatest prophet, often carried a heaviness when He looked at the spiritual condition of people's hearts. Your sadness is not random. It is not empty. It's a reflection of what your spirit perceives long before your mind understands it. You feel the atmosphere shift when others continue laughing. You sense the spiritual condition of a room, even when no one says a word. You feel the brokenness in someone's life even when they hide it behind a smile. That weight you carry is not depression. It is discernment, and discernment is one of the first signs of a prophetic calling. Many people numb their emotions to survive, but you can't. Your spirit refuses to ignore what heaven is trying to show you. When others overlook the suffering around them, you feel it. When others remain untouched by injustice, you lose sleep. When others feel nothing, you carry the ache like it's your own. This sensitivity may exhaust you, but it also reveals a truth. Your heart is connected to the heart of God. The reason your sadness feels different is because it isn't tied to one event. It's tied to what God allows you to feel. Prophets often carry burdens that do not belong to them. You may find yourself crying without a reason, feeling heaviness without explanation, sensing danger before anything happens. This is not emotional instability. It is spiritual perception. God gives His prophets the ability to feel what heaven feels. It's grief over sin. It's longing for people to return. It's awareness of spiritual warfare. It's compassion for the wounded. And here is the part most people miss. Your sadness often appears right before revelation. It is the stirring before God speaks. It is the preparation before God shows you something crucial. Many breakthroughs in your life have come after a season of unexplained heaviness. Many moments of clarity arrived only after nights of quiet tears. That is not coincidence. It is prophetic training. So, instead of asking, "What's wrong with me?" begin to ask, "Lord, what are you showing me?" Because the sadness you carry is not a curse, it is a calling. It is the weight of a heart that is learning to beat in rhythm with His. And when God can trust you to feel deeply, He can trust you to speak boldly. Number 2, you feel out of place everywhere because you don't belong to this world. There is a quiet confusion that follows you everywhere you go. No matter how hard you try, it always feels like you're standing slightly outside the circle, watching life happen instead of fully blending into it. You can be in a room full of people you love, yet something inside you whispers that you're different, not better, not worse, just different, in a way you can't explain. It feels like everyone else knows how to exist here, how to fit into the rhythms of this world, while you're always slightly misaligned, slightly detached, slightly elsewhere. People assume that this means you're introverted, awkward, or depressed. But what if this disconnection isn't a flaw? What if it's evidence that your spirit is aligned with a kingdom that doesn't belong to this earth? Prophets in Scripture rarely blended in. They lived in the same world as everyone else, but their spirits were tuned to another frequency. Elijah felt alone even when surrounded by people. Daniel lived among royalty, but remained set apart. John the Baptist grew up among society but was drawn to the wilderness instead. Prophetic people carry a sense of otherness because their identity comes from heaven, not culture. You feel out of place because your spirit recognizes that this world is not your home. There's a reason you struggle to enjoy the things everyone else finds entertaining. There's a reason meaningless conversations drain you. There's a reason environments that feel normal to others feel spiritually heavy to you. It's not social anxiety, it's discernment. Your spirit cannot settle where God has not called it. You are drawn to purpose, depth, and truth, while the world around you thrives on distraction, noise, and superficiality. That friction creates the feeling of being an outsider. And maybe you've tried to fit in. Maybe you've tried to force yourself into groups, atmospheres, friendships, or lifestyles that the world celebrates. But every time you tried, something inside you resisted, not because you're incapable, but because you're incompatible. Prophets are not shaped to blend. They are shaped to stand apart, to see what others cannot, and to feel what others refuse to notice. That inner misalignment is not emotional dysfunction. It is spiritual distinction. This is why you often feel misunderstood. People misread your silence as disinterest, your depth as discouragement, your caution as fear, your sensitivity as weakness. But what they're sensing is your difference. You weren't built to mirror the world. You were designed to reflect heaven. Your discomfort is a sign that God has placed His mark on you. When you walk into spaces where your spirit doesn't belong, you feel it immediately. When conversations drift into darkness, you sense the shift before anyone else. When someone's intentions are wrong, you feel the tension even if everyone else applauds them. Being set apart can feel lonely, but it is also the confirmation that you're chosen. God cannot use someone who is glued to the world. He uses those who can stand in it without absorbing it. Your sense of not belonging is not rejection. It is protection. God is guarding you from blending into things that would dilute your calling. He is preserving your spirit for divine assignments. So the next time you feel out of place, Remember this: heaven recognizes you even when earth doesn't. You're not wandering, you're being separated. You're not lost, you're being positioned. You don't fit in because you're not meant to. You belong to a higher kingdom, and your spirit knows it, even when your mind doesn't fully understand it yet. Number 3, you carry battles nobody sees because you're fighting wars in the spirit. There are days when you feel exhausted before the day even begins. Not because you've done anything physically demanding, but because something inside you has been wrestling through the night. You wake up tired, heavy, or strangely burdened, and you can't explain why. No one around you sees the struggle. They see you functioning, working, smiling, showing up. But inside, there is a pressure that never fully goes away. This isn't weakness, and it isn't emotional instability. It's spiritual warfare. Warfare that prophets often face long before they even understand the calling on their life. People think battles are loud, dramatic, and obvious. But the fiercest spiritual battles are fought in silence, deep inside the heart and mind of someone God is preparing. You're not just fighting your own fears or doubts. You're fighting atmospheres. You're fighting generational patterns. You're fighting unseen forces that try to silence you, weaken you, or confuse you before you discover who you truly are. The enemy attacks prophets early because he sees what they don't see yet: the power of their voice, the authority of their prayers, the impact of their obedience. Sometimes the heaviness you feel is not yours. Prophetic people often stand in the gap without even realizing it. You may sense danger before it unfolds. You may feel spiritual resistance when walking into certain places. You may suddenly become alert in your spirit, even when nothing bad is happening visibly. While others are comfortable, your spirit is fighting. While others sleep without a care, you wrestle. While others are distracted, you're discerning. This is why many prophetic people have seasons where they isolate themselves, not because they're antisocial, but because the intensity of the battle demands focus. You may feel compelled to pray without knowing why. You may feel unease around someone others trust completely. You may feel the urge to intercede for someone who seems perfectly fine. These are spiritual assignments, not emotional reactions. And here's the part many people misunderstand. The enemy doesn't waste attacks on someone who poses no threat. The heaviness, confusion, sudden waves of fear, or an unusual discouragement you sometimes face are not signs that you're broken. They are indicators that you're targeted, and you're targeted because you're chosen. Prophets carry a spiritual authority that terrifies darkness, even before they fully walk in it. The enemy tries to wear you out early, hoping you'll mistake the battle for personal weakness instead of recognizing it as a sign of sacred purpose. But despite all this, you're still here, still standing, still fighting, still sensing things you don't yet have words for. And that endurance is proof of something powerful. God is strengthening you for the battles you were born to win. The wars you fight in private are shaping the voice God will use in public. You're not losing your mind. You're not imagining things. You're not too sensitive. You are spiritually awake in a world that is spiritually asleep. The battles you carry are not evidence of depression. They are evidence of calling. They show that heaven sees you as a warrior, even on the days you feel worn out. And every fight you endure now is preparing you for the authority you'll walk in later. Number 4. You hear God most clearly in your loneliness and silence. There is a kind of loneliness that doesn't come from lack of people, but from the way your spirit refuses to be satisfied with surface-level connection. You can be surrounded by friends, family, conversation, and noise, but still feel a quiet distance, a gentle separation, as if your heart is listening for a voice no one else hears. People may misinterpret this as withdrawal or emotional fatigue, but for prophetic people, isolation is not emptiness. It is a sacred environment. It is the place where your spirit becomes quiet enough for God's voice to rise above everything else. Prophets throughout Scripture were shaped in solitude. Moses spent 40 years in the desert before God spoke through the burning bush. Elijah heard God not in the wind, earthquake, or fire, but in the gentle whisper that came when he was alone in a cave. Even Jesus often withdrew to desolate places to pray. Loneliness for a prophetic person is not abandonment, it is alignment. When God calls someone to hear Him clearly, He often reduces the noise around them. This is why you feel uncomfortable when surrounded by constant chaos. Your spirit craves stillness. It longs for depth, clarity, and presence. Things that cannot be found in crowded rooms or busy schedules. You don't avoid people because you dislike them. You withdraw because your soul has learned that revelation comes in the quiet. Many of your deepest insights, strongest convictions, and most life-changing moments with God happened when you were alone. Not when you were talking, not when you were explaining, not when you were surrounded by others, but when you were still. And here's the part that often confuses you. Your loneliness doesn't feel empty. Even when the world assumes you're isolated, something inside you knows you're not truly alone. There's a nearness, a warmth, a subtle presence that fills the quiet. It is in these moments that God draws closer, speaking in ways that bypass your ears and go straight to your spirit. Sometimes this solitude feels forced. Relationships fade, people pull away, opportunities close, and you find yourself asking why. But what feels like loss is often God clearing space. He removes distractions so He can speak without competition. He shifts your environment so your spirit can tune in without interference. When God wants your attention, He doesn't raise His voice, He removes the noise. And because of this, prophetic people often misunderstand themselves. They think they're lonely because something is wrong with them. They think they're withdrawn because they're broken. But the truth is far more beautiful. Your solitude is a sanctuary. God is not pushing you away. He's pulling you closer. He's teaching you to hear Him in ways most people never will. So when you feel that gentle pull toward quiet, don't fight it. When you feel distant from the world, don't assume you're failing. When you sense that people can't reach the depth inside you, don't blame yourself. It's not emotional detachment. It's divine training. God speaks most clearly to those who are willing to step away from the noise, and your loneliness is simply the doorway He uses to lead you into His presence. Number 5. Your pain births messages that set others free. There is a pattern you've lived through so many times that you almost stop noticing it. Every deep wound, every heartbreak, every season of heaviness eventually turns into wisdom you didn't ask for but somehow needed. You walk through something painful, and months or years later, you find yourself comforting someone who is facing the exact same thing, speaking with a clarity, tenderness, and authority you never had before. That is not coincidence. That is prophetic formation. God often allows His chosen ones to walk through the fires that will one day free others from their chains. Prophets are never shaped in comfort. They are shaped in pressure, in heartbreak, in spiritual wrestling. Their messages carry weight because they are born out of lived experience, not distant observation. When you speak, people listen not because you're loud, but because your words carry the echo of battles survived. Your comfort carries the fragrance of pain transformed. Your insight carries the marks of someone who has been in the deep waters and came back with truth. This is why your struggles have never been meaningless. The enemy tries to convince you that your pain is pointless, that your suffering is too random to matter. But each hardship was carving something into your spirit, something sharp enough to cut chains, gentle enough to heal wounds, and powerful enough to open eyes. You don't just survive things, you absorb them, understand them, wrestle with them, until revelation is born. And the revelation you carry is what God uses to reach others who feel unseen or misunderstood. You may wonder why your life has not been easy, why you've experienced betrayal, loss, confusion, or wounds deeper than you can explain. It's because people who carry prophetic voices must first carry prophetic burdens. You cannot speak freedom unless you've fought for your own. You cannot speak healing unless you've been broken and restored. You cannot speak hope unless you've walked through nights where hope seemed impossible. This is the divine paradox. God turns your private tears into public breakthroughs for others. And maybe that's why people come to you without knowing why. They share their secrets with you, even when they barely know you. feel understood in your presence in ways they can't explain. They sense something in you, a depth, a knowing, a gentleness, born from surviving things you never talk about. You don't just empathize, you carry their pain with them. You don't just encourage, your words cut through confusion and speak directly to the soul. Prophetic people carry a message they didn't choose. They carry healing that came with a cost. And there is a reason the enemy attacked you so fiercely. He wanted to silence the voice that would one day unlock others. He tried to wound you so deeply that you'd never rise. But every time you got back up, something powerful was forged inside you. Authority. Not worldly authority, but spiritual authority that cannot be faked or manufactured. Your pain did not destroy you. It commissioned you. It prepared you to speak life where others only see death. It equipped you to comfort the brokenhearted, guide the confused, and strengthen the weary. What once felt like unbearable suffering has become the very oil God uses to anoint your calling. You are not just surviving pain, you are transforming it. And through that transformation, others will find freedom they didn't know was possible. Number 6. You feel a burden for people, nations, or souls you've never met. There is something unusual about the way your heart reacts to people. You don't need to know someone to feel their pain. You don't need to hear their story to sense their struggle. Sometimes you look at a stranger and feel a wave of compassion that makes no sense. Sometimes you hear about a nation you've never visited and suddenly feel an urge to pray. Sometimes a name, a face, or even a passing thought about someone grips your spirit so intensely that you can't ignore it. This is not emotional oversensitivity, it is the prophetic burden, one of the clearest signs of someone God has called to intercede. Prophetic people are wired to carry what others overlook. While many people pray only for their own lives, prophetic hearts often carry the weight of people they will never meet. You may find yourself thinking about someone at random, not understanding why, but feeling compelled to pray for them urgently. You may feel deep grief for injustice happening halfway across the world. You may suddenly sense danger, spiritual attack, or breakthrough coming for someone who isn't even aware of what's happening. These burdens don't originate from you, they are placed on you. Scripture is full of moments where God placed this kind of burden on His chosen ones. Nehemiah wept for a city he had never lived in. Daniel carried the pain of an entire nation. Ezekiel felt the spiritual sickness of a people long before they realized their condition. Even Jesus looked at crowds of strangers and felt compassion so deep that it moved him to act. When God places His heart inside someone, that person begins to feel what heaven feels: grief for the lost, compassion for the hurting, urgency for the wandering. This burden often makes you feel strange. You wonder why things affect you so deeply. You question why you can't simply move on like others do. You wrestle with emotions that seem bigger than the situation. But this is the very sign of your calling. God trusts you with what others cannot carry. He places spiritual assignments on your heart because He knows you will respond. Your prayers are not small, they are strategic. Your tears are not weakness, they are intercession. Your compassion is not random, it is divine. And the people around you may not understand this. They may assume you're dramatic, overly emotional, or too invested. They may wonder why a global crisis affects you personally, or why a stranger's sadness troubles your spirit. But you feel these things because God allows you to sense spiritual realities beyond the surface. You stand in the gap for people who may never know your name. You intercede for souls who may never thank you. You pray for nations that will never see your face, and heaven takes notice every single time. This burden is also why you battle attacks that others don't. When you carry people in prayer, you become a threat to the darkness that surrounds them. When your heart moves with compassion, you weaken the enemy's grip. When you pray with urgency, you shift spiritual atmospheres. Your burden is not a curse, it is your assignment. You are not too sensitive. You are spiritually connected. You are not overwhelmed by random emotions. You are being used by God to stand in places where others cannot. Your heart is not heavy because something is wrong with you. It is heavy because heaven placed weight on it, and God does not put his burdens on those who will ignore them, only on those he has chosen. Number 7. Your life moves through sudden breaks, strange shifts, and wilderness seasons. There are seasons of your life that changed without warning. One moment everything felt stable, predictable, familiar, and then suddenly a door closed. A relationship ended, an opportunity vanished, or a new path opened that you never planned for. People around you call it instability or bad luck, but deep inside you sense something else at work, something divine moving beneath the surface. Prophetic people do not live ordinary lives. Their steps are directed by God in ways that often feel abrupt, uncomfortable, and confusing. Those sudden shifts are not signs of disorder. They are signs of divine orchestration. Prophets are formed in transitions. God does not allow them to stay in places where their spirit becomes stagnant. He moves them when it seems inconvenient. He pushes when they feel unprepared. He closes doors that look good and opens doors that make no sense. Not to harm them, but to position them. Every wilderness season you've ever walked through, dry places, lonely chapters, confusing detours, was not punishment. It was preparation. When God calls someone to speak for him, he first teaches them to trust him in the dark. Think about the patterns in your life. How many times did God shift your path without explanation? How many times did he pull you out of environments that everyone else thought were perfect for you? How many times did he separate you from people you thought would be in your life forever? It wasn't because you failed. It wasn't because you were unstable. It was because your assignment required movement. Prophetic people are not allowed to settle into comfort. Comfort dulls sensitivity. Wilderness sharpens it. And maybe that's why you often feel like you're starting over. New places, new seasons, new responsibilities, over and over again. While others build predictable routines, your life seems to take unpredictable turns, but every turn carried a lesson, a revelation, or a shaping that you needed. Prophets learn obedience by walking paths they didn't choose. They grow spiritually by standing in places where they cannot rely on their own strength. And through every shift, God was whispering the same message: trust me, I am leading you. What others see as instability is actually mobility. You are being moved like a chess piece into positions that matter spiritually. While the world changes slowly, your life changes suddenly. Because your calling requires readiness, God can reposition you at any moment. He can open a new door without warning. He can separate you from something that no longer aligns with his purpose. And though the process feels painful, your spirit knows it's necessary. This is also why your wilderness seasons feel strangely sacred. Even when you were hurting, lonely, or unsure, something inside you grew. You learned to pray differently. You learned to listen more carefully. You learned to depend on God in ways you never would have otherwise. Wilderness is not where God abandons his prophets. It is where he trains them to hear him clearly. So when your life moves in ways you didn't expect, don't assume you are losing control. You are not being scattered. You are being placed. You are not unstable. You are being strategically shifted. You are not wandering. You are being led. Every sudden change, every surprising turn, every wilderness chapter was God preparing you for the assignment ahead. Prophets don't take the easy path. They take the appointed one. And every shift in your life is a reminder that heaven has a plan for you far greater than anything you could build on your own. Conclusion: step into what God has been preparing you for. You've spent years trying to understand yourself, your emotions, your sensitivity, your loneliness, your battles, the strange patterns of your life. Maybe people told you that you were too much, too quiet, too intense, too emotional, too spiritual. Maybe you even believed something was wrong with you. But as you look back, you can see a thread, subtle, steady, unmistakable, running through every season. God has been shaping you, not to break you, not to isolate you, but to prepare you. Prophetic people don't realize they're prophetic until one day the pieces start falling into place. The sadness, the burden, the warfare, The intuition, the sudden shifts, they form a picture you couldn't see while you were in the middle of it. And now, as your spirit hears these words, something inside you recognizes truth. You're not depressed. You're not lost. You're not defective. You are chosen. You are set apart. You are being refined for a calling that is far bigger than the pain you've endured. God does not waste wounds. He does not waste tears. He does not waste wilderness seasons. Everything you faced has shaped your voice, sharpened your spirit, and prepared your heart. And now, God is calling you to rise, not in loudness or pride, but in awareness. Awareness of who you really are. Awareness of what He has placed inside you. Awareness that your life has been guided, not abandoned. So take a breath and step forward gently. Lean into His presence. Start paying attention to the whispers, the burdens, the shifts. God has been training you in private, so He can use you in ways that will touch others deeply. If these words awakened something in your spirit, take a moment to stay with God. Talk to Him. Ask Him to reveal more of your calling, more of your purpose, more of your identity. And if this message helped you, consider sharing it so someone else who feels misunderstood can finally see they are not broken, they are chosen. Let God speak to your heart and let your journey continue with Him leading the way.